All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Workshop Wednesday. My name is Dre Devotz, a systems engineer here at Verify, and I'm going to be your host for today's workshop. Today, we're joined by CDR Jesus himself, Victor Verba, another SE over here at Verify, and he's going to talk to you about all the new features in our Verify EFT 13. Hey, Victor, how's it going today, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Looking forward to EFT, buddy.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are. All right, first we're going to start off with a quick overview of our company and what we do. Next, Victor is going to lead us into a live demo to show us all the new things in EFT 13. We'll pause for Q&A and get some of your questions answered. During the demo, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right of the screen. After Q&A, we're going to reward one lucky attendee a $50 Amazon gift card, so hang around to see if you won. Quick overview of Verify. Verify is the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR, UCCX, and Cube call analytics, customizable dashboards, widgets, remote phone control, and change management. But today we're going to be focusing on those new features in our EFT 13. If you have any other questions on any of our other features, please feel free to chat me up in the Q&A panel at the bottom right side at any time. One more thing before we kick things off, for those of you looking for a more hands-off experience, we do offer a managed consulting service. The service that provides a dedicated Verify SC to do all the heavy lifting, giving you and your users a completely hands-off experience. Think of us as an extension of your organization. For those of you who have seen this slide before, we have removed Ninja from the name, but kept the same great service. It provides upgrades, one-on-one training, report and dashboard building, or anything you need. Your dedicated Verify Systems engineer has you covered. The one thing you have to do is give us a call or send us an email. If you want any additional information on our ECS service, feel free to reach out to your account manager. We'd be happy to see if ECS is right for you. With that said, I'm going to kick it over to Victor to lead us into the wild to show us more about the features that are coming in EFT 13. Take it away, Vic.
All right, all right. Let's go ahead and go ahead and pass me the ball.
Yep, you should have it now.
There we go.
Beautiful.
Share my screen out here. All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. Very much appreciated. For those of you that are new to webinars, welcome. And for those of you guys that have sat in on a couple, appreciate your support. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So we are excited to get ready to announce EFT 13, getting ready to roll out. We're just doing some fine tuning. We expect to roll that out probably early to mid next month. We did have a little bit of a delay. We were hoping to originally get it out in April here, but we had some other priorities come up. As if you're paying attention to the news, there have been some vulnerabilities that had to be addressed. So we wanted to make sure we turned our resources to the most important matter. But let's get started. So what are we going to cover today? Some of the larger things that are going to be released in EFT 13. We're going to start off with just general overview of Cube event reporting. We'll show a little bit of UCCX audible alert configuration, something near and dear to me, which is database archiving for those much larger infrastructures or somebody that just wants to retain data for an extended period of time, but not really have that data impact their day-to-day usage. Some minor changes like report queuing, maximum widgets, and some email alerts on report failure. That could be anything from, reports are too large to go through SMTP servers and things like that. If you guys are interested in taking part in the EFT, want to trial out some of these new features, make sure that you head over to verify.com and go to Planet Verify. You'll notice an EFT group right up at the top left at planet.verify.com, and that will allow you to join our EFT group, which will get you all the information regarding EFT and give you a place to kind of voice your opinion or any issues that you guys may experience, or just things that you think maybe should be improved. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of our features in EFT 13. So first thing first, let's go ahead and hit the first one on the list, which was our Cube event reporting. So if you're familiar with our Cube analytics, one of the things that you'll notice is that we report all events taking place for a particular call or series of calls. What I mean by that is we grab all of the sequences of events. With a cube, you have a call coming into the cube, and you also have a call leaving the cube. With that, we also saw that, a lot of times people were trying to isolate just certain events. In other words, I need to know where this network failure is happening. What particular peer ID might I be receiving a network out of order error message? So when we were doing sequencing, which is any version that's publicly available right now, what we would do is we would group all of the events together automatically. 9 times out of 10, you're looking to be able to see all of the events that are taking place. However, there are going to be occasions where you're trying to isolate just one particular part of the event. So let's take a look at a quick example here. So if I pop over to my dashboard, what I have here is basically a widget that is built around that same query. I'm just looking for all network out of order events. So initially, when we were doing sequencing, you can see that we have all of the events listed, and these are basically the media addresses where these events are taking place, or the IP addresses that the events or the network out of order errors are taking place. So one of the things you're going to notice between this one and this one is that we're also coming through with a remote media address of 0.0.0.0. Now I have a relatively smaller infrastructure here. You guys are going to have a lot of different IP addresses. So what we see here, 0.0.0.0 is part of the sequence of events where network out of order is happening. So if I take a look at my call detail, you're going to see I see a lot of 0.0s, but you'll notice I'm getting temporary failure. I'm getting temporary failure because the call's not going through. It's actually network out of order is appearing on my peer ID 100, or in this case, this particular IP address. So when we did sequencing, we would group all of the media addresses or all of the peer IDs together of the entire sequence. But a lot of times you don't necessarily need that. You want to be able to just see, hey, I need the media addresses or the IP addresses where the event is taking place, because sometimes that's the most significant portion. So what you're going to see when I run this report is if I export this information here, right now I'm using sequences, and I'm grouping this off of my peer IDs. So when I run this guy, what's going to happen is it's going to go out, it's going to query, it's going to grab all of the sequences of events. In other words, each leg or hop taking place within my cube, and it's going to give me that total summary of all of the peer IDs. Now we can see 100, 101, and have about 524, 546, and then we jump up to about 1,068. I'm pretty familiar with the data. I know that this 200 here is part of my sequence of events. If I add these guys up, they're going to come up to around 1,068. So that same report, if I choose just event reporting, is going to give me a little bit different result. So you'll notice I don't have the drop down here because we're no longer showing the entire sequence of events. What I have is just the individual event taking place in that cube that has my network out of order. And if I export these results, you're going to go ahead and see that rather than looking at all of the sequences and all of the different media addresses or peer addresses, we're looking at just the information that has that network out of order. So if I look at my report now, I can see that that initial 1,068 calls taking place on peer ID 200 are not in my report because this particular error message is not taking place at that peer. That peer was involved in the sequence of events, but now what I'm doing is I'm isolating just the specific peer IDs that event is taking place. So if we pop back over to my dashboard, you'll see a couple examples of how that looks from a dashboard perspective or also a report perspective. So here you can see I'm looking at network out of order, focusing in on those media addresses, and here's that 0.0. Now I am using the standard sequencing here, and there's nothing wrong with that. That sequencing is extremely important, but in these particular widgets, I really just want to isolate exactly where this is taking place. So once I go to event-based reporting, I can see just the media addresses that this event took place, not the sequence of events and all of the media addresses associated in those sequence of events. Same thing in this guy over here. In this one, I'm looking for any call that has an internal error message. You'll notice on the left, these are using standard sequencing. So you'll notice that my values differ a little here. I'm looking at the top 5 peer IDs that I'm getting internal error messages on. And this is very important when you're looking for internal error messages to know exactly where those peer IDs are having the most issues. So in this particular case, you could see 300 peer ID 300 or route ID 300 has 69 events that took place. This is using sequencing. That means 300 was involved in 69 calls that had an internal error. But when I use that event reporting and isolate just the peer IDs that had that error, you'll notice that my values change a little bit. And you'll also notice that I have an additional peer ID on here because I'm just looking at the top 5. So rather than 300 having 69 total events, 300 actually only has 21 events where the internal error message took place. That also gives way to be able to eliminate one of these guys here, and we've eliminated 100 because the internal errors are not actually taking place on 100. They're taking place on different peer IDs, but 100 was involved in those sequences. But if we remove the sequences, we get a much more clear depiction on exactly where the peer IDs are failing. All right, so that is some changes coming to the Cube Analytics to give you a little bit more flexibility on how you want to report certain events and certain types of things. The next thing we're going to go ahead and take a look at here is going to be our CCX audible alerts. So this is a big one, something that we've our development team has been spent a lot of time and did an awesome job rolling out. This is something that's come from popular requests from a lot of our customers asking for that type of audio alert, something to draw attention to a problem other than just the dashboard. So what I'm looking at here is version EFT 13. If I edit this widget, you're going to notice that we now have a different field within our thresholds. So thresholds haven't changed. You still have the ability to go ahead and determine what your thresholds are, apply those to all CSQs. But what you're going to notice now with your thresholds, besides being able to just set the color, you also have the option to play an audible alert. From here, you can choose which audible alert you want to receive. Maybe it's information. This is an orange tag, so orange does not mean, hey, this is vital. I need to, all hands on deck. So I can do an informational message. I could set the volume of that message, and also need to reset the repeat interval. How often is this information message going to repeat? Is it just going to repeat one time? So an example of that would be a chime. Do I want it to just chime once? Or do I want it to chime 3 times every 2 seconds? And then you can go ahead and set that. Now, once that value turns orange or that threshold is met on your wallboard, that's going to go ahead and play through your audio, and you'll be able to see those informational messages. Same thing, you can have different audible sounds playing for the same dashboard. So in this particular case, I've got a red warning. Anything greater than 5 for my ring no answer %, I want to be able to have a different message. Maybe I want that to be critical. That's a problem. So here we have our volume up at 75. I could set my repeat interval. How often do I want this critical alert to play? And then how often is it going to go ahead and repeat, and set those. So again, another great new feature, something that a lot of customers have been asking us for, just a different way to draw attention to a dashboard or a particular problem. Again, the dashboard does have to be up, whether that's part of a permalink or whether that's part of just your general dashboard. This is going to go ahead and draw some attention to some potential problems. Now, one thing to keep in mind as you guys are building these out, keep in mind that your different tones are going to chime throughout the day depending on what you set your thresholds. So if you set a threshold very low, it may chime a little bit more often than you want it to, but something to keep in mind, and also something to go ahead and kind of experiment and play with a little bit as you're listening to some of the tones that we have available here. Next thing I'm going to go ahead and jump over to is going to be our database archiving. So this is a very big change for us. This is really geared towards some of those customers in our enterprise environments, or even some of our smaller to mid-range customers that really want to store larger amounts of call data. Currently, as Verify is designed, all that data is going to go into a singular database. If you wanted to take that data and maybe move it somewhere else for what we'll call kind of an archiving method, it was a manual process. So what we've done is we've actually integrated some of that database archiving into Verify. So this is going to be a large change for anybody that's familiar with some of the cluster screens and things like that. But what you're going to notice here is I have my general cluster built. I have my CDR processing settings. Now, some of the biggest change you're going to see is going to be in the CDR processing and the CDR database. Now, what CDR archiving or database archiving is designed to do, and this is for CDR-based, call manager-based information, as well as for our queue-based information. What we're going to do here is we're going to take your data, and as we're processing it in, we're going to go ahead and create a what we'll call a hot database. That hot database is what you're querying now. That's the one you want to keep relatively smaller. So think of it like this: if I do, let's say I have 100,000 calls a month, and I have to store 7 years worth of data. That's a lot of data to keep in a single database. That's a lot of data to have your end users query regularly when they're just on average maybe looking for a weekly report or a monthly report, or just querying, looking for a call that happened in the last 30 days or something like that. So rather than keeping all of that 5 months or 6 months worth of data in one database, what we can do is we can design archiving. We can keep our primary database down to, let's say, 1 month's worth of data, 100,000 rows. Why? Because on any given time, we normally query only about a month or 30 days or 60 days worth of data. Or I could keep this at 2 months worth of data, because at any given time, that's normally what my end users are utilizing. However, maybe for compliance, we need to store a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, but we don't query that regularly. Every now and then we may have to look for a phone number for legal purposes, or go back and do some trending or something like that, and that's absolutely okay. But we want our user experience for that data reporting to be fast, and that's where archiving comes in. So what we're doing in this particular example here is I have database archiving enabled. So we've got our processing enabled. Here's the name of our database. I've also enabled database archiving. Now, the nice thing about this is, depending on the size of your environment and how much data you want to archive, you don't have to write all this to the same SQL server. And in most cases, our recommendation is going to be to have a separate SQL server that's keeping your archiving information. Now, why do that? Because of efficiency. You want your day-to-day reporting, you want your day-to-day end user experience to be fast. You don't want it to have to query or run queries or have your resources utilized for the previous 6 years worth of data every time somebody wants to just run a report for the previous week. So by taking that information and putting it onto a different SQL server, you're eliminating the resources or the resource utilization for your day-to-day usage on your primary database. And now you're shifting that usage to a secondary database that, may get queried once every couple of years, or maybe, once every few months, somebody has to go back and look through some of that archive. Great thing about this is that is absolutely seamless for your end users. Whether you are querying your live hot data or whether you are querying your archived information, there's nothing you need to do in Verify to specify which data, or hot or archived, you want to query. That's all taken back and done in Verify. So we understand where your data lies and what data between what databases it is. So that's all seamless for your end users. So what we've got here is we've got our primary database, we've got an archive database. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a hot database, we'll call it. We're going to have a cold storage, and we're going to have kind of like what I'll call like a live cold storage. The way that this functions is, as your call records come in, we are essentially writing them to 2 databases. We have your hot, and then when we have your cold archive. So the way we're set up here, once every 3 months, we're going to go ahead and take this archive and we're going to rename it to, say, Archive 2, and we're going to create a new one. So now you're going to have a running list of databases that have only 3 months worth of data. So if I needed to go back and say query December of last year, that's going to go out automatically to the December archive, only query that 3 months worth of data because that's what's in there. I'm only querying 1 month, I'm just querying December, and then bring that information back. But the nice thing about that is none of that resource is going to be hitting your primary hot database because, again, that's where your users go. Now, let's say, for example, I need to query something across 2 archive databases. Maybe I need to query from December of last year to February of this year. no problem. Again, that's seamless. Verify knows which archive databases to go query, and it's going to go ahead and pull that information back from you. Again, eliminating the need for that additional resource on your hot database server, but also keeping that hot database smaller. So again, your day-to-day operations are not going to be impacted by storing a year's, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years worth of data. So in this example, we are running an archive every 3 months. It's going to run on the 18th of the month at 5:55 p.m. We are keeping our hot database or our primary database small, 2 months worth of data. So let's say, using that example, 100,000 calls every 30 days, we've got 200,000 calls in here, where our other databases here are each going to have 300,000 calls, keeping them relatively small and easy to query, but not impacting our primary database. So nice thing about that, completely automatic, completely automated. That's just going to allow those archives to run. Your reports are not going to be impacted. The only thing it's going to do is improve some of the performance on those longer storage models or those larger storage models. So taking a quick look at it, just to kind of give you an example, and unfortunately I didn't have a whole lot of data to pump into this. So what you're going to see here is the databases that are associated to my cluster. So here's my hot database. I have April 3rd through April 15th in here. Again, keep in mind I was keeping these relatively small with my purge schedule. Here's my archive 1. At the time that anything comes into my main cluster or my hot database, it is also going to come into my active archive right here. And now what I have down here is just an archive database that's sitting there. It's not using any resources from my hot, because it's on maybe a different database server, or in all honesty, it's just not being queried because it's several months old worth of data. We don't need to query it. But if we did need to run a report, say from right now for the past 6 months, we will know and we will query the proper databases as they go to be able to pull that information back. So it's a great way to be able to go ahead and work with a lot of those enterprise environments, that larger databases, keeping those databases small for the day-to-day operation, but also taking some of that larger data structure that they may need to retain for policy and moving it off somewhere where it's just not using the resources from that hot database. Next thing I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about, and just some improvements I found extremely useful here. One of the things that we do is we do a lot of Active Directory authentication. So what we could do previously is when we queried Active Directory, we didn't require a login. Why? Because there were certain fields, and there are certain fields within your Active Directory that can be queried that don't require a login to be able to get to those fields. Things like SAM account name is a standard Active Directory field. You don't have to actually log into your Active Directory to be able to query that field. However, we have a lot of customers that tried to use other fields like email or user principal name. Those fields do require a login. In other words, nobody can just connect via LDAP and query those particular fields to authenticate. However, with the latest version of EFT, what we've done is we've added the ability to go ahead and query some of those more restricted fields within Active Directory by using a distinguished name and password. So what you're going to notice here is mail, for example, is a field that was available in Active Directory, and a lot of people want to be able to log in to verify using their email addresses because that's what they use across their company. Totally okay. So we can now use the mail attribute by using a distinguished name and password. That's giving us the flexibility to then log into that Active Directory and query the mail to make sure that this person that's trying to log in is valid. Same thing, user principal name is also another field that we had a lot of customers asking to be able to use to be able to log in to verify. So with EF13, if you want to be able to utilize mail or UPN or some of those more restrictive Active Directory fields for logging in to verify, you'll be able to go ahead and do that by creating a user and password that Verify can then use to be able to log in and validate those credentials. Just a couple more things, and I hate to use the word smaller because, as anybody knows, with development, there's no such thing as a small change. Another thing that we went ahead and added is the ability to report queue. So what this means is we've had a lot of customers that have a lot of reports. Naturally, you reports for different parts of your organization. People schedule reports for different things. You have a lot of hands in Verify making changes. So what we found is previously, Victor may schedule 5 or 10 reports. Dre may go out and schedule 5 or 10 reports, and all of a sudden you've got 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 reports all running at midnight. It's great if you've got the resources to be able to run 10, 20, or 30, 40 reports all at the same exact time. The problem is that uses a lot of resources all at once. So we recognize this, and we also recognize the need to be able to have all those scheduled reports. You have a lot of people scheduling reports at different times. So what we've done is we've added the ability to queue those reports. So now, rather than just trying to kick off every single one of those reports all at the same time, we're going to go ahead and allow those reports to queue. This queue, or how the reports get queued, is configurable. So in your application settings, by default, it's going to come out with being able to queue up to 3 reports. That means 3 reports will run at the exact same time. Keep in mind, this does not affect your history searches. So anybody just running some ad hoc reports or something like that, this queue does not affect that. Those are still going to run like normal. What this predominantly affects is going to be your scheduled reports. So what's going to happen is, let's say we have 30 reports going all at the same time. It's going to go ahead and run one of them. It'll run 3 of them. When one finishes, it's going to go down to the next one and the next one and the next one. This is configurable depending on your environment and the resources that you have available on your server. You could easily run 10 reports at the same time. Other systems are running off of a base. Maybe it's a smaller system, and running 10 or 12 reports at the same time may really drag down and cause some potential resource issues as those scheduled reports are running. So we have defaulted this to 3. We've not seen much of an impact at all running 3 reports at the same time. Also keep in mind, as you're running these reports, one of the things that we see, people are using the canned options: run for the previous day, run for the previous week, run for the previous hours, things like that. So if that report runs on the 1st of the month for the previous day, and maybe you've got 20 of those running, whether it runs at midnight or it runs at 12:15, or it ends up running at 1 o'clock in the morning, depending on where it's queued, it's still going to go ahead and give you the same information because it's running based off of previous's. So this is a great resource help that we wanted to go ahead and get out there, because we saw a lot of customers and a lot of systems struggling, just trying to run mass amounts of reports all at the same time. So this is going to go ahead and help alleviate that. Another option that we went ahead and added in here, and this is also under the system application settings here, that's going to be under setup and then application settings, is the ability to configure maximum number of widgets. So one of the things that we did notice under the dashboard is that people were adding a lot of widgets. As people were trialing the system or just kind of playing around with it, they may add a dashboard and start configuring it, and then they like what they got, and then they'll move it over to a live dashboard. I'll use Wallboard as a perfect example. Rather than just adding a widget in there and finding out it's not the right information, but now it's popping up on their Wallboard. What they would do is they would create a separate dashboard, and they would kind of build that widget out. We'll call it a test dashboard. Then they would just copy the widget once they got it to how they wanted and move it over to the Wallboard. Perfectly acceptable, perfect. That's one of the reasons that we built copy functions into the system, to be able to do that, to have that test. But one of the things we also found is that test dashboard got pretty large because nobody was ever deleting anything. So again, when we talk about resource issues, when you've got 20 widgets running on a single dashboard, and maybe you've got 5 of those dashboards, those are refreshing. Those are trying to keep up to date as people are using them or navigating around. So what we've done is we've kind of limited the maximum amount of widgets you could put on a dashboard. We're going to start off with 15, which is a pretty large number of widgets to have on a single dashboard. And of course, that can be increased through system application settings. This is not going to affect your current dashboards. So I will preface that was one of the questions we had is this going to go ahead and then just remove a bunch of widgets that I had on an existing dashboard because I've reached my 15 threshold? No, it will not. We are absolutely going to go ahead and grandfather anything in that's already been running, so we're not going to go ahead and break anything. But going forward, as they're going ahead and creating dashboards and widgets, when they try to add that 16th dashboard, they're not going to be able to. Give them a little message saying, I'm sorry, you've reached your threshold. But of course, if they decide that that threshold needs to be larger, you can absolutely come into application settings and adjust that. Application settings is not going to be available to everybody. So your general users are not going to be able to come in here and play with your settings. This is a system administrative function. All right. And then last but not least, as we wrap this up, the other thing that we went ahead and added is the ability to go ahead and add some email alerting. So you'll notice that under call analytics and reporting settings, what we can do is we can now toggle on email alerts. So let's say you've got a report that runs every month. It's a little bit on the larger side, maybe some days it's 8 meg, some days it's 10 meg. But your SMTP server is set to max out at 10 meg. In other words, it won't allow you to send anything larger than that. Well, that's a problem. Previously, when a failure like that took place, you could always see that the report failed because it would pop up in your reports repository under reporting. However, there was no alerting. And in other words, you didn't know that that report didn't go out. And if it wasn't your report, maybe it's something you scheduled for another manager, you really had no idea that failed, and the manager is going to come back and say, hey, where's my report? What we're going to do here is allow you to go ahead and select an email that's going to go ahead and receive that report or that alert that the report failed. So you'll have a little bit of information as to why a report failed. And that could be anything. You know, maybe a report was running and for some reason you lost access to SQL Server and the report bombed out. Maybe it timed out because you're having some database issues or some issues with resources within your Verify system. Now we're going to go ahead and allow that failure to generate an email to send to the administrator or whom you choose within the drop-down here to give them a little information as to why that report is failing. So I'm going to wrap up with that. We've got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe. For anybody looking to get more detail on any of the features that I just talked about, we have done previous webinars on all of these. So you can absolutely come to our webinars channel. If you scroll down to the What's New section, you're going to see EFT 13, and we get into a little bit more detail of how these function and how to set those up. So, you know, make sure you pop over there. And then if you are interested in joining EFT, make sure you go ahead and go to our user community. You can get there right off of verify.com. And you'll notice right up at the top left over here, you'll log in with your standard verify.com login, and you can join our EFT group. That's going to go ahead and send us an email, and we'll approve you to join EFT. And then from there, you're going to be able to get information about the downloads when it's released, but also share your experiences through that EFT. So with all that said, Dre, I'm going to pass the ball back to you, buddy.
All right, sounds great, man. Thank you. Great job as always, Vic. Let me go ahead and reshare my screen. Just finish this off here for us, as kind of Vic was talking about a little bit on Planet Verify here, but just a reminder, Planet Verify, our new online community where you can connect with your peers and expand your knowledge of all things Verify. Please, plus you may end up with some new drink recipes from the Cantina. It is also a place where you can sign up to be a part of the upcoming EFT, as Victor was stating. All right, last but not least, we're going to head over to our week's winner for the $50 Amazon gift card. And this week, the winner is Dan Farrell. Congratulations, Dan. Your account manager is going to be reaching out to you shortly and get you that gift card. Thank you, everybody, so much. Don't forget to join us next week where Jim and Matt go over computed ring time and time to answer metric. Lots going on there, but always a good learning experience with those two. All right, everybody, thank you so much and have a great rest of your week.